It's the 23rd of May 2025, and today Tony Viney has kindly agreed to share some of his recollections of his early life at Lower Barrington. I wonder if you could start by telling us what made your parents decide to buy the property.
Yeah, the reason behind our trip to Lower Barrington for 30 years, our parents were living in Rosebery at the time. Dad worked in the mill where they process the ore, and we lived in an EZ company house which was clad with corrugated iron, and I can tell you by all reports she was pretty cold and damp. I was born in Rex, my brother, was born in 1939 in Burnie. The women used to go to Burnie and where their children were born, because Rosebery wasn't the best place for that. Anyway, Mum was on the way to Burnie with me, pregnant, and I decided I'd had enough of the train ride. So an ambulance came to Hampshire and met the train. That's where I was born, in the ambulance at Hampshire. It's on my birth certificate, Hampshire. Rosemary was born in Deloraine. After the trouble I caused Mum, Mum decided to go to Deloraine and stay with her parents, who had retired and living in Deloraine. I told you about that cold, damp house. The firewood was always wet, wouldn't dry out in that climate. And I remember Dad saying one day the sun popped out after weeks and weeks of wet, cold, damp weather, and they said, here's our chance, and they put all the mattresses out in the sunshine. And Dad said the steam rose off most of the stuff that they put out. That's to give you some idea what it was like. Dad was very fit in the early days in Rosebery. He'd won the mile race it sort of upsets me a bit to talk about. He'd won the mile race at the Labor Day Sports Carnival several times in Rosebery, and the people from Rosebery decided to enter Dad in the Burnie Christmas Carnival, and because he'd run very good times for the mile race. Anyway, apparently people have told me a whole trainload of people came from Rosebery to see Dad run. But anyway, he never won. Don't think he even ran a place. Anyway, back in Rosebery, a few months later, he became unwell, and the X-rays showed. Sorry about this. He had mineral dust on his lungs. It scarred his lungs badly. Anyway, the doctor said they couldn't do a thing for him, but his doctor's advice was to get the hell out of the West Coast. Anyway, Mum had an auntie, Auntie Alice her name was, and she had read in a book about English miners how the smell of freshly turned soil is very good for their lungs after they got this same lung miner's disease, as they called it. Anyway, she advised Dad to go farming. Well, both Mum and Dad had grown up on farms, so that wouldn't have been a problem. Anyway, they had a talk about it, and they said, that's what we'll do. So in the Advocate, in the real estate section, they saw this 80-acre farm at Lower Barrington for £1,200, walk in, walk out. And they decided that Dad couldn't get away from the mill, so Mum went up and had a look at this place. She met her father, who had agreed to come and look at the place, and they met at the Sprayton railway station, because it was all train rides those days, and they went up and inspected the place with the agent. Anyway, the agent showed me everything, the implements and livestock and the buildings and everything. Anyway, that night she phoned Dad back in Rosebery, and she said, with all the info, and I got the pros and the cons here. The pros were very good soil, livable house, lots of potential, Mum said. a good barn and stable and a very nice district. Lots of potential. And she loved the views of Mount Roland, and you could actually see the sea on the horizon from our property, from this property. Anyway, the cons. This was very poor fences, falling down in actual fact, and blackberries covered just about the whole farm. There was only one well for the stock water, and the place that was just generally run down, and some stony ground. That was all the cons. Anyway, I got this here to prevent old timers disease. Back in Rosebery, they talked it over, and Mum and Dad decided they'd have a crack at this farm. So they offered the bank manager, and the bank manager, which they knew well, he agreed to lend them the £1,200. And after settlement, she was off to Lower Barrington for the family, and for the first look for Dad and the kids, our home, which would be our home for 30 years. And I just got a note here, and the World War II was in full swing at this time, I must mention. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, who owned the farm, met us, and Les explained about the 80 acres, about this, how it was subdivided. When it was subdivided, they told the surveyors they only wanted 80 acres of the prime red soil and no off-coloured soils to be included. So consequently, our farm had a dog leg on the boundary to miss out on the off-coloured soil on the northern boundary. On the the east and southern boundary, there was the surveyors had got it wrong. There was a square lump of ground. Instead of all the boundaries joining on the one spot, they were all offset, and there was about a 5 metre by 5 metre no man's land, which was a real talking point for anyone that ever saw it. Les showed Dad and us kids the livestock. There was 12 dairy cows, 4 sow pigs, and a boar and a bull, 2 horses, 2 draft horses, and all the harness. And I got here a fox terrier dog, which I do remember fondly, and unnamed. Bennett didn't tell us what the dog's name was. Anyway, the farm implements, there was a single furrow plough, a 2-disc chaise plough, a set of harrows, a sledge, a horse mower, a flat top wagon called a lorry, and a seed drill, and that was it. Leslie explained about the stable. Now, this stable used to be a house, and it was towed over from the neighbouring property with a big team of draft horses. And apparently Arch Reeves was born in it before it was towed over to our place. And I think Tom Reeves actually built it. It was a work of art. It was all split, made out of all the framework was split black wood, and not a nail in it. It was all dowels, and it was absolutely, should have never ever been pulled down. Anyway, Mr. and Mr. Bennett, Les told Dad the farm had just become too much. They just couldn't handle it, and he admitted it was run down badly. Mrs. Bennett told Mum about the butcher calling twice a week from Sheffield. Used to come in the van, I remember it well, and the baker used to drop the bread off at the road in a box. And also the other information about the people in the district and the house and all the other stuff. I said a kind and lovely lady. That's right. And the Bennetts, after we took over the property, Bennetts bought the Lower Barrington shop, which was the post office and the telephone exchange. The mail used to come from Sheffield. Bennetts had the mail car. Loris used to drive the mail car and bring the mail. Most people just got the mail, went to the shop and picked up the mail once a week. There was no such thing as those days as a roadside mail. Everything came to the shop in the mail. Yeah. Anyway, from then on, for Mum, Dad, and Rex, myself, and Rosemary, she was nose to the grindstone for us. And the cow shed. It was 2 bales, a tiny little shed backed up to a fence with no yard round it. This is third world stuff, I'm telling you. And this is how it was. and the dairy was over near the house, a tiny little building, about 6 or 7 feet by 7 foot square. A tiny little building. It had a separator, a hand crank separator, which meant when they milked the cows by hand, the milk had to be carried 100 metres across to the house, to the dairy, put through the separator, and Dad had to carry it all the way back to the pigs. I reckon he covered more ground than Burke and Wills over the years they had it. Next thing, Les showed him the well, which was Mum was worried about this. That was the only water on the farm, was from this well, and I remember it. It had this cast iron pump called a billabong with a big swooping handle, and the trough was a hollowed out log, like a native makes a canoe, big long log. Anyway, Dad used to put in about 20 minutes 3 times a day filling this trough with this old slow cast iron billabong pump. And there was one cow, if the trough was really low and she couldn't drink, if she was there waiting for a drink, Dad would throw a rock at her to get her out of the way so he could get ahead. That's how fast she could drink the water faster than Dad could pump it. Anyway, these 2 draft horses, they were called Punch and Bloss. Punch was the biggest horse I've ever seen, a massive. His breed was called a Shire, and the Bloss was, I don't know what breed she was, just a little old mare. And the farm was, I mentioned the blackberries. The fences were actually blackberry hedges. The blackberries had grown up over the fences, and some of them were 5 feet high. And the first couple of weeks we were there, one of the sows, instead of having her piglets in the sty, she decided under the blackberry hedge was the best place. And it was 2 weeks before Dad knew how many pigs she was that deep in amongst this blackberry hedge. I nearly came unstuck the first couple of weeks we were there. The bot flies were bad. The horses hate them. They buzz around the horse's feet and lay their eggs on the hair on the horse's legs, and the horse apparently bites these eggs off, and they grow inside the horse's stomach. So the horses must have known that. They hated them. Anyway, Dad was harnessing the horses at the stable, I remember, and he had the winkers on them, or the blinkers, or whichever you like to call them. Dad used to call them the winkers, which mean the horse can't see backwards, he can only see straight ahead. And he'd gone into the stable to get the horse collar. Anyway, I toddled over to see, because I was fascinated coming from Rosebery. He'd never seen animals before, except a couple of dogs. And I toddled over, and these horses were all on edge with the botflies, and Punch, the big Shire horse, he lashed out with both hooves, and Dad came out, and both hooves went one each side of my head. I would have been splattered. Anyway, the man upstairs looked after me. And that unnamed fox terrier dog, Bill Morey, he lived in Barrington. He came to see Dad one morning, and we were having our breakfast. Anyway, this foxy bit him, and Bill Morey came in with some blood coming off his leg, and he said that bee dog out there of yours is a cannibal. Anyway, Dad said, "Thanks, Bill." He said, "We've got a name for him." On the West Coast, anyone that's read the story of For the Term of His Natural Life will know all about Alexander Pierce. Well, he was a cannibal. His nickname was Gabbett. So this dog from forever on was called Gabbett. He was the greatest rat catcher you've ever seen. And 2 years later, Mum and Dad paid off the £1,200 loan, and she was all freehold from then on. There was only one tractor in our part of the district. There could have been others elsewhere. Everyone had draft horses, which meant they had to feed them. So every farmer put in a paddock of oats. And I'll never forget the day a chap came with a binder. We had 3 beautiful big draft horses pulling this binder. and I'll never forget this wonderful machine with the beaters and pulling the tops of the oats over and cutting them off at the ground and putting them in, making them into sheaves with a string round them with it tied up. It was absolutely fantastic. I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, they used to stoop them up, and when they completely dried, they'd cart them over to where they wanted to get them cut into chaff. Dad, with his flat top lorry, carted them over and made a stack near the barn. The barn was full of baled hay. Made the stack, and I remember pitching the sheaves up to Mum on the stack. Mum actually built the stack. I remember it was a problem. They never thought about it. When the walls of the stack got 8 foot high, Mum said, how am I going to get down off here? So of course, like Ted Bullpitter say, it caused a bit of chaos there for a while. But anyway, he got it down. The next thing, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, is Sid Smith from Barrington. He had the chaff cutter and the steam engine. And I remember, never forget, this steam engine rolling across our front paddock to the barn, pulling the chaff cutter, and a couple of utilities with all the men in behind working. And I can't I'll never forget it. But the thing is, the women had to feed all these blokes. And poor old Mum, there was no trouble because she was a good scone maker, so that was no trouble. And when they cut the chaff, they used to feed this chaff cutter. They had 2 blokes there carrying the chaff in chaff bags from the machine, just with open top, and they used to go over to the stable and tip it into the chaff house, tip it up a ladder and tip it over the wall into the chaff house. Yeah, and I got here, we had a chook called Treaky. She was a pet one. Anyway, these men were sitting around having their morning tea, and they're talking away, and this pet Treaky, she grabbed the scone out of the bloke's hand and took off with it with about 15 other chooks in hot pursuit. It was absolutely hilarious. Anyway, that was the highlight, probably, the cutting, the binder and the chaff cutter of my boyhood. But probably a couple of years later, Dad was pumping the well, and next thing she started to slurp. She was running dry. Anyway, something had to be done, so he got onto a bloke called Rafe Thomas. He was a water diviner. Anyway, he came. And I'll never forget this. He came and he went over to his car. Dad explained about the well, and he wanted to see if he could find a new one. So he gets this little fork stick like a chook's wishbone. Anyway, he sort of turns a couple of pirouettes, and he said over this way, and he headed over towards where the little cow shed was. And he got over there, and this fork stick, it did a couple of somersaults or whatever it did, and Rafe Thomas kicked the dirt and made a bit of a hole. He said to Dad, he said, "Digger here, Bill." so he said it'll be about 20 feet down the water. He said you'll find it'd be beautiful digging, no stones, and he said what was the other thing? No stones. And to be just beautiful soft water. Anyway, Dad, when he said no stones, Dad, I think a smirk went on Dad's face because you couldn't dig a post hole without actually getting a stone. Anyway, Dad and his mate Bill Carpenter, they got a hold of a windlass, and they set it up over the spot where Rafe Thomas had kicked, and they got a circle. Which was a tire off a steel tire of a horse-drawn vehicle, and they put it in this, put it round in with the bit of kick dirt in the centre, dead centre, and they started to dig. And the idea was they would let this with a shovel go around the edge of this steel, so they got a perfectly round circle, dug a perfectly round hole. That's what it boiled down to. Anyway, and when they got down a bit, Dad would let Bill Carpenter down on the windlass, just sitting on the bucket, and he'd fill it up with dirt, and they'd wind it up, and they used to take turns backwards and forwards. And anyway, and in the meantime, still letting this steel ring down, and with a plumb bob to make sure it was perpendicular. Anyway, on the third day, they got down to 19 foot 6, we'll say, and the water started to come in, seep in, and it was getting dark. Anyway, I remember Mum bringing the stable lantern over for them to finish the well off, and they pulled up the last. I don't know whether it was Bill or Dad wound one each other up, and that was it. In the morning, they went down and it's amazing. This well was sort of about a half full of this beautiful, absolutely beautiful water, unbelievable. Anyway, Dad got in touch with the bloke in Latrobe, Jim Stevenson, who was a very famous hydraulic engineer, and he came and had a look, and he said Dad had already built a pump shed, and he set up this pressure pump. It was fantastic. It went all the years we were there. You'd see a cow have a drink in the trough way over the paddock, and you hear the little pump cut in to fill the trough up. And Dad was that excited. He ran some pipes across to the house, and for the first time we actually had running water in the house. Anyway, this was fantastic. And he went to Devonport. I'm getting ahead of myself here. That's right. And the butcher from Sheffield, his name was Mr. Splain. He delivered the meat. Anyway, he told Mama the war had ended. Yeah, and yes, I'll never forget this. Yeah. Anyway, I'll get over the next page. Anyway, health started to improve with this ploughing. So Auntie Alice's clue about the smell of the freshly turned soil was probably good. His health returned, and he actually played football for Barrington until he was 40. So he really. Anyway, later on, as the finances improved, if I mentioned the Austin A40U, later, as the finances improved, they built a new modern dairy with walk-through bales and simplex milking machine. It had a Lister engine on it because the electricity hadn't been put up to the dairy yet. So they put a Lister petrol motor. That went for a few years. Anyway, Dad's back gave out on him, and he had to go to Latrobe Hospital, and he was under traction for several weeks, which meant poor old Mum had to do the milking. By then we had close to 30 cows, and anyway, one day I remember she couldn't start it, and like the colt from old regret, the word passed around Mrs. Viney was having trouble, couldn't start, and I reckon every neighbour for miles was there, all with their own opinions and trying to start it. Anyway, in the end, I remember Jeff Allison started it. So he got it going. I'll give you some idea what the people were like. In 1950, he bought our first vehicle, a brand spanking new Austin A40 utility. And Rex and I, the cab was only really for two people. And with Rex and Mum, with Mum and Dad and Rosemary in the front, she was pretty tight, and Rex and I rode everywhere in the back, and I got here very al fresco at times, I can tell you, all weathers. Elizabeth, my little baby sister, she was born in 1951, and Mum became very sick. She got a kidney failure, and Dad used to go to Devonport to the Merecroft was the hospital, to see her every day, and he'd come home with bread tomatoes, and brawn, which is he probably knows some pig's head or something. And we lived on that until, I don't know, for weeks, and the wheat bix I've added. Anyway, they brought Mum home. Mum brought, when she did come home, Elizabeth had been premature. She looked like a little doll. That's what we remember what she looked like. Next thing they bought was the greatest thing that's ever come into any house that I've ever lived, but it came into our home, was a Rayburn slow combustion stove with a hot water system. For the first time in our lives, we had hot and cold running water in the bath. I tell you what, it was a godsend. Next thing was a little grey Fergie. We bought it. Ferguson diesel. It was a diesel, this one. And Dad went halves with Bob Hill with the implement, so it worked out very well. It's got a fantastic little machine. He started a Tamworth pig stud and an Australian Illawarra shorthorn cattle stud. And we had, by now, about 35 dairy cows. In 1958, they built a company from Halverston built us a brand new home. Their company name was E. Flint and Company. They built this, and Dad and I pulled the old place down, and they built some of the sheds up around the garage and the woodshed out of some of the old house. Yeah. I've got here some humorous events. One of our neighbours was George Page. He was a bachelor up on top of the hill. He lived up on top of the hill opposite us. He had the toothache bad. One of his wisdom teeth was giving him hell, and he came over to Dad. I think he really wanted Dad to pull it. But Dad was he was a good farmer, but he was no dentist, I can tell you. So Dad said, no, go to Sheffield. You'll see Dr. Sender was a Sheffield and Mrs. Sender was the dentist. Dad explained, just go in where you'll see Dr. Sender, go in there and you'll get your tooth pulled. So George goes up to Sheffield, got a ride up. He never had a car either. And he goes in to Dr. Sender's part. And he said to Dr. Sender, I want this tooth pulled, this wisdom tooth. And Dr. Sender, sorry, I don't pull teeth. He said, the wife's practicing. Well, he said, I'm buggered if she's practicing on me, he said. And he did a U-turn and got a ride home and went to Devonport and got the tooth out in Devonport. And this beautiful well water we had hooked onto the house, it started to become, after about 12 months, it started to taste funny. Anyway, Dad said, something wrong with that. So someone came and Mum made him a cup of tea and didn't want to drink it for some reason. anyway, Dad went over to the well and they had a board covered. The well was covered with this boards, and a couple of the boards had rotted. And he looked down and here's three little pigs floating. They disappeared. Dad didn't know where they went, and and my brother, he was a very witty bloke, Rex. He said, we've been drinking bore water. Yeah. And one of the funniest thing that ever happened, I think everyone in Lower Barrington knows about Frank Pinner and Dad. Frank Pinner lived up the road at Barrington, and he phoned Dad one morning. He said, Bill, will you come up and help me load the pig? I'm having trouble to load this pig. Anyway, Dad said, yeah. Frank was taking it to the sale. So Dad gets up there and Frank's got this old early model Holden car backed into the pig yard with the boot up. And Dad said, which pig are you loading? Frank pointed to this great big lump of a pig, and Dad said, God, that'll never fit in the boot. Oh, Frank said, I think it will. Anyway, they wrangled and for about 5 minutes, and they actually got the pig into the boot. And Frank went to shut the lid down, and every time he pushed the lid down, the whole squeal to come out of this pig. He had about 5, and he eventually got it clipped. Anyway, Frank said, and Dad said the old Holden was rocking, and Frank said, no, it'll settle down once we get moving. Anyway, unbeknownst And unbeknownst to Dad and Frank, as they were driving down the gravel road past the house, the pig burst its way out of the boot, and going over the bump, the boot re-locked itself. So and Mrs. Pinner's at the window, saw what happened. She's there waving and trying to stop it. Anyway, they set to the sale, and Frank said, "Oh, I knew she'd settle down." There wasn't a movement in the car. Anyway, they get down to the Coiba, to the sale yard, and the auctioneer said, one of the reps said, "What have you got, Frank?" And Frank said, "I got a pig, a big lump of a," and they said, "Back it in here." So they backed it in because they couldn't back it into one of the ramps, and they got a couple of the agents, one each side, and they were trying to, with their hands out, they were going to usher this pig into the, and Frank said, "We're all ready?" "Yeah," and they're all there sitting, and Frank goes up, whips the boot open, and there's nothing in there. She's empty. But Dad said the funniest thing was, Frank's mouth dropped open, and he went over to where the jack, they keep the jack, a little thing, as though the pig had shrunk in a minute. He couldn't believe it. It was a talk of Lower Barrington, and people still remember it. Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you this one. This is about Harry Collins. Poor old Harry. He was a bachelor. He'd worked for Edmund Rockcliffe, who was one of our neighbours. He'd lived in the hut there for years and years. He was that farm labour, but he'd got old. Poor old Harry. And man, could this fella eat? He was good on the fang. On Sundays especially, he'd go down to Allison's. Mrs. Allison would, because all the women had a lovely Sunday, we used to call it breakfast, dinner and tea, had a lovely Sunday dinner. And he'd split some wood and sticks for Mrs. Allison, and then she'd give him a big baked meal. Then he'd come up to Mum and Dad's place, and he'd do the same, split some wood for Mum, and Mum would come out with this great big meal and pudding. He poor blokey. Anyway, this particular day he was splitting some wood on the heap, and Rex and I were there watching. You know, he could really, he would have been at least 80 years old at the time. Anyway, splitting away, and this huge grub came out of the wood, a massive, big, yellow-looking grub. Anyway, it got in the sawdust, and Harry didn't see it. Anyway, my brother thought he'd have some fun, so he gets this grub, and he opens his fly up, and he puts this grub, and he said, "What do you think of this, Harry?" Anyway, next thing, a blood-curdling scream came out of Rick. This grub fastened onto, you can guess where. And my brother is coming up 86, and he tells me he's still got the tweezer marks where this grub took a lump out of him. Oh yeah, this one's not true. This part, they reckon. There's a story in Lower Barrington to raise money. I think it was for the football club. They one of the local towns had an ugly man competition, and they said Lower Barrington sent their man up, and the bloke said, "Oh, sorry, mate, I can't. You're disqualified." And they said, "Why?" He said, "It's only for amateurs." So he must have, yeah. And New Year's Eve used to be all us young blokes would do some whitewashing. It would no harm in it, just write the year, you know, so on someone's shed or just in whitewash. We just used, first rain it had come off. Anyway, the Reeves boys that lived down below us, they were having some fun there one night. Anyway, Smith brothers had an old black horse, so these Reeves boys made him into a zebra. White stripe. They did it perfectly. Anyway, you'd never believe that. You see the cars come down the road. Next thing you'd see the tail lights going. From a distance, you could swear it was a zebra. What else have I got written here? Oh yeah, our dad was a very hard man. By gee, he expected we had to pull. You know, You didn't back chat him. He'd give you a job and he expect you to do it. And he'd never say. He never He always knew if you did it right, he wouldn't say anything, you know. But if you did it wrong, he would certainly let you know. Anyway, one day Rex, my brother, he said, you know, he said, I've never ever heard Dad. The only time I've ever heard Dad say "well done" is when he's ordering a steak. Anyway, another day we were having our Sunday dinner, and a knock came at the door. Anyway, this lady was collecting money for the retarded children, and they said, Mr. Viney, would you like to make a donation for the retarded children? And Dad, yeah, he said, I will. He said, I read 4 of the buggers myself, because we weren't any good at athletics, and so it was a bit of a joke. Yeah. I'll just tell you about we had Dad bought a most beautiful border collie pup, and you're not supposed to put little pups on adult sheep because some of the adult sheep they'll charge, you know, and knock them down, and it puts them off. It's really so. Dad decided that we had a big rooster. He used to walk around, strut around the place like he owned it. So Dad said that'll do. So he used to get the bucket he used to feed the pigs with, and with the top cut out of it, lay it on the ground. The idea was to get this little pup to work this rooster into the pig bucket. Anyway, it went on for a few weeks and until he actually got him to do it. Anyway, after another couple of weeks, as soon as Dad had put the pig bucket down, the rooster would just hop straight in. He wasn't going to go muck around with all this. Yeah. And now another thing I got here, talking about riding in the back of the ute. My Rex and I, we always rode in the back. And when Elizabeth was born, she used to stand behind Dad, and while Dad was steering, it was Mum, Rosemary, and Elizabeth standing behind Dad. So and Rex and I in the back. That's how it was. Anyway, Dad's father was living in Launceston. He hadn't been well. He was getting on a bit, and Dad wanted to see him, so we all headed to Launceston. Well, I tell you what, the time Rex and I got to Launceston, you can talk about having a numb bum. Well, I can tell you. Anyway, everyone went inside, and Rex and I thought we'd stand for a while. So we were standing out in the yard, and Dad's father, who was a very, very well-spoken old chap, he'd gone to Launceston Grammar School. He's very well educated, actually. He saw us boys out there, and the kind old bloke, he came out and he said to us, he said, would you boys be holding your water? And we stood there with our mouth open. We never heard that saying before. And he said, well, he said, if you are, he said, the lavatory's over there. There was so I knew what holding your water meant. Now, every time I see my brother Rex now, which is very infrequently, he always asks me, am I holding my water? Anyway, the mayor of Sheffield was C.R. Morris. He was a little rotund man, short, and he had the biggest car, big Dodge car. And you'd see us come down the road past us, and you couldn't. Someone said, "How is he? Couldn't he see the road?" Someone said, "I think he navigates by the power poles." You know. Anyway, Dad had killed a snake. Anyway, Rex and I thought we'd have some fun with this snake. Anyway, we hook it on some real fine string, and we put it across the other side of the road. And the idea was, when a car came, we were going to waggle it across. Anyway, who should come over the hill was C.R. Morris. Anyway, we proved that he didn't steer by the power poles. He hit the brakes, and we only got one trip across with a snake. He made mincemeat out of him. That's some of the funny things that happened. I got here the properties that changed hands and our neighbours. Living over the road was Levick and Mrs. Rockcliffe. That was they were the second generation of the Rockcliffes, and Roland and Roe and Alan were the third generation. They were our neighbours over the road, and on the the northern boundary, was Edmund Rockcliffe, which was Levick Rockcliffe's brother. They lived on the farm, and they actually sold the farm later to the Smith brothers. Bought that. Down the back, Watty Johnson, he owned the farm, and he later sold that to Carl Sykes, and Mick Murphy and Mrs. Murphy, they rented the place there for years, and Kay and Jamie Radcliffe had good neighbours down to the back. They bought it. And through the No Man's Land, the Lillico family, Bob Weeks bought that one. Billy Hill, he lived on our southern boundary, and their son Bob, he was a cartage contractor for the district. And then there was over from Bob Hill was Lowry, Miss Joe and Mrs. Lowry, and I got here, and hard-working Laurie Connors and Mrs. Connors bought that farm. George Page, who I mentioned, got the toothache. He lived on top of the hill. The Allison family been there for a couple of generations. The Rutter family lived near where the Radcliffes, the Reeves family bought that one. Well, this is all while we were living in Lower Barrington, and there were two ladies, the Miss Watts, their name was. They sold their farm to the Brinkman family. These Miss Watts, they had I don't know what it was a gong, and at 12 or about, I don't know, it was 12 or 1 o'clock, they'd come out and they'd give this gong, whatever it was, a whack, and you'd hear it all over our part of the district. They used to employ men on the farm, and that was the dinner gong. Yeah, so you could hear it everywhere. George Spur, he had the farm where the Smith brothers bought that. They were beautiful farms. The ones Brinkman bought, and the Smith brothers, and Rockcliffe's farms. They would hold their own to anything on the coast, I reckon. The sad thing was our neighbour Edmund Rockcliffe, when the Smith brothers bought this place, Edmund, they had bought a house in Sheffield, and they'd moved to Sheffield only a week, and Edmund came back to get some chooks. Anyway, the chooks had taken residence up a tree. Anyway, Edmund climbed the tree to get these chooks and actually fell out, and he must have injured himself badly because he only lived a couple of weeks. So his retirement was very short, very sad actually. Yeah, I think we're getting close to. Oh yeah, I got things I remember. The petrol pump at the Lower Barrington shop. I remember a hand pump. Les Bennett used to pump the petrol up in the glass, and I remember Dad taking the Austin Ute there after we bought it, and he said the gauge was showing almost empty. He said, "Give us a pound's worth, Les." And Les pumped whatever a pound's worth up. Anyway, he put the hose in the tank. Always said, "I'm sorry, Bill, she won't take it." So it gives you an idea how much a pound would buy those days. I got here, and the gravel road was a gravel road up to Sheffield, and Mr. Williams, I got here. He was the foreman on the road gang that made the beautiful new road for the to be sealed. And while we were waiting for the school bus one day, this very smart-looking car came down the road before it was sealed, kicking up a bit of dust. It was something beautiful-looking car. Someone said, "What's that?" Because we're used to the old Pommy car. And Charlie Brinkman said, he said, "You wouldn't believe it." He said, "That's one of the first Holden cars. That's the 1948 it was. The first Holden car that came up our road." And I remember it. And I remember Les Bennett. He bought a beautiful Ford Mercury car. And Loris used to drive that to Sheffield to pick the mail up and bring it to the shop. I got the dinner gong at Watts Farm. I remember that. The Barrington School at Upper Barrington, that closed. I was supposed to go to that. I think they heard I was coming and they closed it. And how hard our parents worked. Yeah, and another thing I remember, Mrs. Lowry, who Laurie and Mrs. Connors bought their property, they had a pet black swan. This huge bird it was. I'd never ever seen one before. Another thing I remember is Alan Rock, our early bus driver. He didn't mind a cold drink on a hot day. Anyway, he was must have been a bit under the weather. He got Alan Rockcliffe, drove us home in the school bus. One of the school boys drove the school bus home. He drove it to absolute perfection, I must say. Yeah, and I just said I consider myself lucky to grow up in such a lovely district with good people. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for listening to hearing our story.
Thank you so much, Tony, for sharing all those wonderful memories of your life growing up in Lower Barrington. We appreciate the fact that you've been willing to participate in recording these memories and you've given us such a valuable insight into what life was like.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you
very much.